Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Canberra Node Cyber Spotlight series, where we look at our local Canberra ecosystem, the cybers, and what they're doing. Today we have Dan Holman with us, who's the founder of Worldstack. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Can you tell us a little bit about Worldstack?
Yeah, so Worldstack was founded about 6 years ago now. We still consider ourselves a startup, even though we're about 20 people now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a cybersecurity company that focuses on open source intelligence solutions.
Okay, great. What is open source intelligence?
What is open source intelligence? Good question. So essentially, it's the collection, analysis, and reporting of information from open sources. So that's things like social media, the web, search engines, and the dark web.
So when my daughter stalks people on Facebook?
Yeah, that's technically open source intelligence, yes.
So maybe she can talk to you guys about a job down the track.
Sure, yes. Yeah. We look for people that have that kind of interest and innate curiosity in people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And what about you? How did you get to where you are? What's your history?
So my background's a technical background. So I started out as a computer technician out of high school. I went and did a degree in computer science, software engineering. I was hired by IBM straight out of university. I spent 3 years doing that, and really liked the aspect of, I guess, working with businesses to understand their problems and come up with technical solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So I got brought into defence in 2010,
and
I've been in Canberra for the last 10 years,
okay.
Focused on cybersecurity. And open source intelligence came into my life about 7 years ago, just before we founded the company. Our co-founder and I were working at a company called StratSec, which was a small cybersecurity company founded by a couple of local entrepreneurs, Pete Lilly and Doug Stewart. You might recognize them from Instacluster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another Canberra startup. I don't know if they can call themselves that now.
They're doing pretty well.
They're probably a scale-up now. Yeah. So they founded StratSec. I joined when StratSec was still pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
And there I met Eric. So I met my co-founder, Eric Fliss. His background is very different to mine. In terms of security, his background was in protective and physical security.
Okay.
But he got into cybersecurity. He just wanted to, I guess, apply the same principles of risk management to cyberspace.
That's interesting.
So he has a completely different view, and I really like that. I guess my background, as I said, is in technology. His is in physical and protective security. And he had been working in his own time in open source intelligence. So he's done a degree in counterterrorism, policing, and intelligence. And he was tracking terrorist groups on Facebook in his spare time, because that's what he liked to do when he wasn't working. So he showed me what he was doing, and I thought that's pretty cool. In particular, I guess with my background, he was sort of doing everything manually. So he was doing all this collection. It was repeated, like every few days he'd do the collection, understand what's changed, to try and understand, what are their behaviors, what are their motivations, are they changing the way that they're talking or what they're doing, tools, techniques, and procedures. And I thought, hey, we could build a solution to automate this problem. Like, you shouldn't be running these searches over and over and over again. And then along the way, we were sort of drawing on napkins about how it should work, what a system could look like to do that. And we were looking at something, I can't remember what it was, and we spotted something on Google Trends, and there was this like interesting graph which sort of showed, looking at what people were searching for, were giving you hints about what were interesting things that were going on in the world. And I thought, what if you could do that, but not just Google, but across everything? And if you could collect from across social media, search engines, and the dark web, but combine all that together into one picture to try and understand what the things are that are of interest that are going on.
That's a massive data set.
That is a massive data set. And we didn't tackle a small problem. We weren't really thinking about that at the time. It started from trying to solve a small problem, and I guess just from there, it snowballed, and we built the first prototype and went out and started talking to people about it and showing it to them, and just use that customer feedback to keep developing the product.
What was your first target market? So talking about customer feedback, who were you aiming at with this product?
I guess we were in cybersecurity at the time, in terms of we were both consulting. So we went out to try and talk to some of those customers and get their feedback on, could you use a solution like this in terms of proactive intelligence gathering for cybersecurity, in terms of tracking threat actors. And we had some traction there. We also went out and talked to government, law enforcement agencies to say, could you use this in your industry, in your market? And we had some success there. I guess probably the biggest challenge we face when we're out there talking to customers about the product is getting people to think proactively about intelligence. At the time, it was before intelligence-led security was a thing. It's still an emerging thing. It's not a common thing that companies are actually focused on yet. What we found was it was only the really most mature, well-funded companies with big cybersecurity capabilities that were ready to start looking at proactive intelligence gathering. What we found, though, while we were talking to those customers is they were very interested in, okay, maybe not monitoring things that are going forward, so start monitoring now and think about detecting things that happen in the future. Could you look into this person and tell me everything about them that's ever happened online? So this is where digital footprints came in.
Of course.
And we said, okay, that's cool. Can we use what we've done with Providence, which was the solution we created for monitoring? Could we use the same engine but do it in terms of looking at the history of something up to this point? And that's really when we started getting real traction in the market. So
that's really social profiling people's history and activity online.
Yeah, people were way more interested in that. And that's because, I guess, the innate nature of things where more resources are put into reacting to problems that you have rather than proactively monitoring to find new problems. People had this burning need to get information on targets. Say, let's throw in law enforcement scenario. I needed to understand, my target, what's their locations, where are they heading to, who are they talking to, what's their network look like? And just so happens that we'd built a solution that already collects all that information. And then I guess further down the track, we started looking at, could we also think about what in that data was most of interest to them? So, for law enforcement, it was drugs, knives, guns, all the usual stuff. But if you could have, and we started with keyword lists, because we're collecting all this content, could you run a classifier using this keyword list over all that data, tag it, and then actually give them a filtered intelligence report that says, well, okay, we looked at this target, collected all this information, but here's the things of real interest you want to action on right now. Okay. So, and then from there, I guess we pivoted again, and we took that Check Social solution and we said, we saw a tender actually that came out on the digital marketplace from a federal government agency looking for a digital footprint check solution for security vetting. So
they didn't have a solution for that was automated or covered that breadth of data?
No. So one of my previous lives was I also worked as a security vetting officer. So I had an understanding that I guess they weren't really doing a lot in the space of digital footprints. So their focus was more on interviewing. So they interviewed people to understand what their life history was, try and get an understanding of their character and whether these people were suitable to give security clearance to. And there was a risk assessment done on the report created where there was a recommendation whether they should get clearance or not. When I was doing that work, I guess this was sometime down the track after we created Providence, I thought, could we use the same sort of thing as what we've got in this engine already to do digital footprint checks for clearances? Because that seemed to be missing out of the security clearance process. They weren't really looking at the online aspect of someone's behavior as to whether they should be eligible
which is an
for a clearance.
Entirely different profile to the profile that you present in interviews.
Correct. And so at the time, this was around 2016, 2017, the policy around security vetting in government didn't really encourage the vetting agencies to do digital footprint checks. What was really going on was probably some Googling. Some people, the vetting officers were trying to Google and see if they could find something. There wasn't really like a concerted effort to actually do it properly. And then over the next couple of years, we started seeing more effort put in from government departments like the Attorney General's Department with the Protective Security Policy Framework, which really looks to solidify that policy approach in terms of you should be doing a digital footprint check and providing guidance like this is what one looks like. And I think that was really the genesis of when we started to see a push for a solution, because to do those digital footprint checks properly, it's quite time intensive and it's quite complicated, and you need a certain skill set and mindset, like what we talked about right at the beginning of the interview, that curious individual, really good with social media, really good with search engines. And it just so happens there was a different skill set usually in the security vetting officers. They're not typically those sorts of people. They're investigators. They're slightly different sorts of people, so they didn't have that skill set. So when you now have this need to do this check and you don't have the people to do it, then you start looking for a solution.
Well, it would be incredibly time and resource heavy to be going through all of those, especially if it's not their usual form of investigation, to then go through all of those sorts of engines across the interwebs.
Yeah, look, so typically to do that properly, it would take you a few hours, which is obviously not scalable doing it manually. So we went about taking what we'd done with the Worldstack engine and Check Social and said, could we modify this to be able to look for the things that were in the PSPF? So the PSPF defines 7 risk factor areas that characterize someone's, I guess, behaviors online. So it covers things like substance abuse, mental health, your conduct online, like financial aspects. So, do you have a lot of wealth, or what sort of things do you buy? Do you gamble? All of these things are used as part of the vetting process to try and get a psychological profile of someone to understand, should they be trusted with information, sensitive information. So we took those and we turned them into basically things that we could put into our Worldstack engine and say, when we're collecting information on a person, highlight the content that matches these risk factor areas. And then that went into the report, and essentially that's where the solution came from for digital footprint checks.
And I guess you'd be able to tailor those reports too, because you've got the different, breadth of data set, and then the different things of what you're looking for. So whether it's aligned with the PSPF or some other sorts of policies, you'd be able to tailor it.
Definitely, and that's what we're doing now. So we're looking at things like using them for due diligence. So when companies are thinking about working with a new partner, doing due diligence on the company itself, but also the board of that company.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's enough headlines about things like that, isn't there?
Yep. So, and we're getting some traction in there as well. And then investigations more generally. So I talked about that earlier around law enforcement, government, but also corporations that need to do investigations work. We're finding that they have a need and there's a use for the Check Social platform in that investigations work.
Okay, interesting. And you also offer it for the individual to check their own digital footprint, don't you?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. We created that one. That actually happened when we were talking to hiring managers. So we went out and said, okay, so we've got this pre-employment checking solution that works for security clearances. There's something that's very similar, which is, okay, well, everyone you hire, you're basically doing a similar process, right? It's vetting. Yeah. So we went and talked to the hiring managers, and we started signing up hiring managers in corporations and also recruiters who do a similar job. But then we were starting to hear commonly, could I do a check on myself? I want to try this out. I want to try to see what's out there on me. And so we thought, okay, so that's interesting. We hadn't thought about the consumer market. And so, we modified it to go out and say, okay, well, we can have a consumer product so individuals can check themselves.
Are people surprised by what they find?
Always. Always. So, we find a lot when we're talking to people about their digital footprint. Like, I'm really careful online. I don't say things that I shouldn't say. I'm not into, forums that, have right-wing aspects and things like that. But we always find something. We always find something where the person's like, wow, I forgot about that. Or can you see all of that? They're just not aware of what others can see about them online.
And I guess there's a lot of people that have grown up with this. So, people in our sort of generation, you grew up with MySpace and then Facebook and all these different things. And when you're a teenager of a different generation, all that stuff was just left in some photographs. Whereas now it's all online. And this is the thing we're trying to teach our kids, isn't it? About this is what's coming. Everything is there. It would be an interesting education tool for children too. Look what mum and dad were doing back in the 90s.
I don't know if the parents would like that one.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you talked about some challenges along the way and some obviously problems you were trying to solve. What were some wins for you or some successes that you'd like to tell me about?
Yeah, look, probably a significant factor in our trajectory was OzCyber and meeting you guys.
Excellent.
I have to say that because it's true. We found our relationship with Pen10 through you guys. So we've now built a product together, called Honeytrace, which we haven't got to talk about yet. But
it sounds like a good segue.
So Honeytrace is a data breach detection platform. So what it does is essentially Pen10's technology is around generating believable fake things,
Mhm.
documents, Wi-Fi points, whole systems, networks. And talking to Ben Whittam, one of the founders of Pen10, I can't remember where we were talking about. We ended up talking about what each other did, and he was saying what he did in that sort of using AI techniques, machine learning to create this believable fake content. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if with our Worldstack engine, you could take that content and then tell you if it appeared anywhere on any of the sources that we're monitoring?
So first of all, why are they creating fake content?
The premise is if we create some content that's attractive to an attacker, they'll come and when they're doing their searching, so when an attacker's infiltrated a network, one of the things they'll do is start searching around to try and find what's interesting. And they'll use some search terms probably relevant to what they're looking for, financial data, customer data, etc. So if you think about that from an attacker point of view and you create fake things like PowerPoints and spreadsheets, things like that have those keywords and things in them, and if you open them, they look kind of believable enough to go, this is of interest, I'm going to take this, then you're encouraging them to take something which then they take outside the organization, presumably, and they'll open somewhere. Now, one of the things that we're doing there is embedding beacons in those documents. So if they open them, they'll phone home and say, hey, I'm outside the organization and someone's opened me, which gives you an early warning beacon, right? The other thing, though, is if they don't open them and they like just try and monetize them, let's say they take the database dump. So let's say we've injected a piece of fake data into a database, which is a customer records management system, and we've put a fake row in there of a customer. When that data then goes for sale on the dark web, which is a place we're monitoring in the marketplaces, if that customer row came in the sample data that the attacker would put to say it's real, we would pick that up and say, hey guys, your data's on this dark web.
And they would never have known except for that it turned up on the dark web.
Yep.
Wow.
So that's an example of what we're building and how both of our companies' technologies, I guess, come together to help solve that detection puzzle, because we're still at around 200 days for detection in terms of a security incident.
Wow,
so,
that's a long time.
Yeah, and when you think about it, we're not stopping the incident necessarily, but you're finding out about it potentially a lot sooner than, say, and a different mechanism than, say, through the media.
And can you trace it back then to where that was taken from? Yeah,
exactly. So the tokens themselves are uniquely identifiable to the database or the content store that you deployed them in, and also date timestamp. So when you deployed them. So the idea is you could potentially deploy one a month, and then if you find the token, you know roughly when it was taken and where from.
Okay. And so this would be looking for internal action as well as external, I assume.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's also useful for insider threat. So we've got all sorts of scenarios working with customers for Honeytrace in terms of what could I do in terms of doing drops on my privileged users to see what they're clicking on. Why are they clicking on this stuff? I've dropped the keys on the desktop. Why are they looking at that?
Yeah. Wow.
All sorts of scenarios for, I guess, assessing insider threat as well as obviously those external threats.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so Oscyber helped with the coming together of obviously Pen10 and Worldstack to create this?
That's right, yeah. So we were in the second project fund. So we got a grant through Oscyber and the Australian government to, I guess, build out that concept, which became Honeytrace. And we've run a number of customer pilots successfully so far.
Fantastic.
And so we're just working now on how do we commercialize it.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. That's excellent. I'd love to hear the stories of one of the things I love about our Canberra ecosystem is the collaboration and the way that we come together. And as you said, you met at a conference or a dinner or something, and just chatting about what you're each doing separately, successfully, and then how to bring that together and create an entirely new solution.
Certainly, yeah.
That's fantastic. It's awesome. What's next for Worldstack?
Yeah, so as I mentioned right at the beginning, we're about 20 people now. Just recently hired our head of engineering, Keith Player, who comes to us from Nuix, where he started at, I think it was developer number 3. And he spent 14 years with that company, rising to the rank of engineering director for APAC. So he's
got some chops.
He's taken an engineering team, a smallish engineering team, and grown it to a big engineering team, and that's something we were looking for.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about having Keith on board. Also could take one of those hats off.
I was going to say that gets you a little bit back off the tools too, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And where I want to be focused more now is on sales. Yeah. I guess that's one of my other major hats that I wear is I'm still primarily the salesperson, but I get to spend more time doing that. I guess in terms of other things we're doing right now, the team is working on another release of Check Social. So more features for those customers who are already our customers, but also I guess what we're listening to in the market in terms of what they're looking for. One of the most exciting things we're working on is a capability called continuous vetting.
Okay.
So that takes what we were doing with Provenance with monitoring and what we're doing with Check Social and vetting, and says, rather than just doing a check every 5 years on your security clearance holders, continuously check them.
And again, you I guess have that sort of beacon system where if there's flags of things that are happening, and rather than waiting 5 years to find it if they did something terrible.
That's right.
Oh, actually, that's really great.
Yeah. We're really excited about it. Obviously, I mentioned Honeytrace as well, so there'll be the launch of that towards the end of this year with Pen10. Super excited about that one. Other exciting things on the roadmap for Worldstack are we've got a grant with this ACT government and the Canberra Innovation Network, and that's for development of a capability that's really close to my heart. So part of the reason why we got into doing what we do is because Eric and I are both really invested into protecting things. It's part of the reason why we got into security, right? We've just got this innate desire to protect things. And so when I sort of got involved with some of the challenges that law enforcement were facing around child abuse, I said, how can we use our technology to help these people? And one of the key problems in that space is burnout. So the amount of material that some of these officers have to go through when they're investigating these cases is horrific. And in a lot of cases, they have no idea who these people are. And they just want to be able to help them. And I want to be able to help them. So we said, well, why can't we use our open source technology to try and help identify who these kids are and who these suspects might be in this material? So we're working on a solution using a grant from the ACT government and the Canberra Innovation Network to build a solution to automate that. So
it's taking eyes off glass, so you're not got somebody having to look at this content all the time.
Correct.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a wonderful project to be working on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Congratulations on the grant.
Thank you. It's something we're really passionate about. It's something we really want to see be successful. And we're really excited to be involved in it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dan. It was awesome to learn a little bit more about Worldstack and the really exciting projects that you guys are working on. And I can't wait to see what comes next.
Great.
Thank you.